This show, it feels like I've heard this story before. That's the strange thing. Like, I thought the Changeling was a classic story.
Well, it's a book that came out in 2017.
No,
In fact,
but even
the
before
narrator...
that, changelings, like in mythology, I thought were like a thing where babies would be replaced with a different thing, like an evil demon, and then that the mom or the dad would realize that as they were raising it and freak out. I think I've seen that on not a Twilight Zone, but like one of those type of shows before, and that's what this reminded me of, at least by episode 4. The first 3 episodes are very slow moving. This stars Lakeith Stanfield, right?
Yes.
This guy from Atlanta, guy from Get Out, Sorry to Bother You. He is no stranger to weirdness, right? His Darius character in Atlanta, I think, is what made the Apple people here like cast him and say, we can hone the entire show around his experiences and he's going to be able to sell it.
Well, it's funny you say that because he became a father very right before they started shooting, so he said it was easy for him to get into the role. He's also an executive producer for this series.
Of course he is, because he's that famous. But Malcolm Barrett is also in it. He's from Better Off Ted, Preacher, The Boys. I didn't recognize where I knew the wife from. I think that's Clark Bacco, but I recognized her from somewhere.
Well, this is one of her first main roles. She was in Designated Survivor and Letterkenny, and this is her third main role that she's been a part of.
How much, since you saw the first episode, you kind of got the basic premise? It was like a parallel love story. The first episode's named First Come Love. The second episode is called Then Comes a Baby in a Baby Carriage. That's because in the first episode, they do get married, they do find love, and they also have the baby. So I guess
at the very end, yeah.
Yes, and then in the third episode, that's called, that's just an asterisk. And then the fourth episode is called The Wise Ones.
I am so glad I only watched the pilot to this, because it seems like the first 4 episodes, like I cannot imagine binge watching this show. There's so much information that's thrown at you or that you just have to accept. There's also a lot of genre bending, I feel like.
Not genre bending, but a lot of strings. Because the whole entire thing is it's just supposed to be creepy. That's the overall tone. The first episode, you could probably give a synopsis for. It falls down to just a parallel love story where we learn about Apollo and Emma in their relationship and how they get together, as well as the past, how their parents, specifically Apollo's, Brian West and Lillian Kagwa.
And that's not revealed until midway through that it ends up being the parents that we see. Because we think that we're just watching 2 parallel love stories.
No.
I did.
No.
You knew that those parents were...
Yeah, I think it's presented really early on. Again, I've watched 4 episodes, so I have to go back to my memory of the first one, but I thought like immediately, because when he starts talking, no, it's because he asks her out on a date, right?
Yeah.
And then we immediately see the backflash of his parents being asked out on the same date.
I didn't know that they were related, is my point, because it's at the very...
I don't think it's a secret.
It's when she's given birth that they decide to give him the name Apollo because of Rocky, but he takes his name to mean the god of Apollo.
Well, his dad says that to him, too. Brian West, speaks to him. He's like, you are the god Apollo. And I think that's just more a self-confidence thing that he repeats a lot. But yeah, so Apollo and Emma, they end up together. They get married. She goes off on an adventure in Brazil and ends up getting cursed by a witch. And then she comes back, gets married to him, has a baby on a subway. And then the next episode, things are not going... I'm just going to zoom right through it here. Things are not going well because she has postpartum depression, but also someone's stalking her and able to delete text messages. Snapchat exists before it actually existed. Basically, she keeps on receiving these texts that show the Apollo and the baby out upon their day, and then the person sending her those is able to hack into her phone and delete them and make her seem crazy when she keeps on talking to her husband about it, along with the fact that she's joining this Facebook group that's not Facebook. It's called Friends something or other that Apple likes to do that. And so she's just getting driven insane. She starts to believe the baby isn't real, that it's some demon spawn that needs to get baptized. And when Apollo fights back against that, she chains Apollo up, hits him with a hammer, goes completely crazy, kills the baby. Next thing you know,
so the baby's dead.
By episode 2, the baby is supposedly dead. By episode 3, Apollo's getting out of prison for going in with a gun to try to kill his wife at the library, but she's already gone. And then you got this weird, strange William guy who also had the same thing happen with his wife, and he's been the one who's been stalking Apollo and his wife this whole time. He loops Apollo into, without Apollo understanding that guy has a connection to these crazy women, to going to this place, this random island in New York. They break into it. all the cult women are there except for his wife and William's wife, and then they get beat up, and that's basically where we end it. So
wait, so all that stuff
happens
is presented in the first 4 episodes.
Again, Apollo is basically just looking for Emma at this point. At first, he just wants to kill her because of what she did, but now it's more just about asking questions, because it was almost like in that 4th episode, he was convinced that the baby wasn't real and that he was imagining it, that was an illusion, but we're not 100% clear on why.
But the baby is like 100% dead. Like, it's not coming back.
The last we've seen of the baby, which again, he named after his father, whose name is Brian.
Right.
So he kept on calling it Brian, and she would only call it the baby. And then by the end, she was like, it's not even a baby.
Right.
but the last we see is she's taking a tea kettle into the room. She's got crazy hair. She hits him with a hammer.
I did see this scene. She like picks up the tea kettle when it's still on fire, right? Or it's on the oven.
Yeah, but then he's like, don't hurt it, don't hurt it. And she walks up to him, and at this point you can tell like all her humanity has been like zapped from her. She is a complete witch or whatever demon that has possessed her, and she takes a hammer and just slaps him over the head with it. Well, actually over like the chin, because he gets a scar for the rest of the series. Yeah, I think
he like breaks his cheekbone, right?
Yeah, and he's like almost knocked out, but then he still says like, don't hurt it, and she like turns around, and that's when she's like, it's not a baby, and then she like disappears. And that's the last we've seen of her, besides some CCTV footage that shows she's still looking crazy mad with her hair going nuts and off on this island with this other cult of women.
So the first episode seems to be at least the least crazy, because
it's a love story.
The thing that happens is she goes to this vacation, right? Where does she say that she's going
to?
Brazil.
And then it starts with a Q. I forgot the name of it.
And then she meets a woman who obviously like has some type of connection with.
The woman is like the mix of a genie and a witch and a mystic, because she's just hanging out near a pond making weird like hand signals. She's got one blue eye, and Emma comes up to her, and she takes out a string, the old woman does, wraps it around her wrist. It says, don't cut it, or else your 3 wishes will come true, but it will also cost your life.
Right.
And we find out her first 2 wishes, because as soon as she comes home, Apollo cuts it.
Yeah, I'm glad I was not the only one who was annoyed by that. Even if she didn't believe in the whole entire prophecy about the 3 wishes, she was wearing this thing for 6 months.
6 months.
And then he just pulls out a knife, makes it very clear he's going to cut it, and then does so, and she was just completely okay with it.
Yeah. And her first 2 wishes, we come to learn, are that she wants to get married and then have a healthy baby. Mm-hmm. And we just don't know what that 3rd wish is, right?
Yes.
Did you see, was it in the first episode where they have the Michelle dinner? Yes, because that's right before they go to the subway.
Yes, yeah.
And she tells Apollo, while Emma's in the bathroom, about how Emma also like met a photographer, and she took this weird nude photo where she's like looking at the camera.
But it wasn't the photographer that took the nude. She like did it herself.
Yeah, that's not the part that matters. It's more whether or not this whole thing with the witch and the string, whether that is the thing that caused the baby to be crazy, or whether it was inherently in Emma to begin with. Like, was she just like that type of person? We don't know the limits or bounds, kind of like with Servant for the first few seasons. We don't know what's actually supernatural and what's just people acting crazy. Because again, William as a stalker, it seems like the text messages are in her head, but then we learn that they're not. So
okay.
Yeah. And this all takes place in 2010, so it makes a lot more sense why they are more skeptical of the technology. Like now it's like, oh, Mr. Robot, it's people like that can exist and hack into your stuff. Well, but back then it was like earlier.
The first episode had a lot of like time jumping at least.
Yes.
We start in like, I think the 90s, and then like it jumps to the 70s.
Yeah, should I just jump into my pros and cons? Because I feel like we've addressed at least the overall plot, and you can ask me more about it as it goes on. But that falls into pros and cons. Pros or cons first?
Let's start with pros.
I have less of those than I do with cons, but the show wants to be clever, and I give it credit for that. We've got that weird narrator, right? And we still don't know who that is after 4 episodes. I know the voice is famous.
He's the one that wrote the book.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's probably, I like the narrator, and that's probably a reason why I think
it's under a pro for me.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it's under a pro. It feels like the show wants us to be getting a history lesson at the same time. It starts off spitting facts. July 5th, 1825, the Norway to America sleuth that was like encountered issues or stuff. Like it was a hard journey, and the only way they could get to America was with help, and that was supposed to be supernatural help. Then we also learn about the Great Garbage college strike of 1968. That's how they introduced the Brian character to the mom. You got Stanley Kubrick's Killer Kiss, which came out in 1955. We see a backflash of that. We see 1977, Rocky, Apollo. And then we learn in later episodes when they're talking about the postpartum depression and all that stuff that Emma's dealing with, that like she's not getting enough sleep. And I did read that sleep book that came out that's super famous. And it talks a lot about how if you're still sleeping but you're not getting enough NREM sleep, you can starve from that and die or go completely crazy. And so that
actually fits.
At first I thought maybe this wasn't really 100% supernatural at all, and that she is just kind of devolving because she's not getting enough sleep. And then, yes, the multiple timelines reminded me somewhat of The Time Traveler's Wife, because not only are we getting two love stories, but they're also happening, like they're time zooming throughout, because you see the beginning of the relationship in a library in Queens in 2010. And then it just goes all the way until they have the baby in the first episode, and then all the way till where he like gets out of prison.
So you like the timelines?
Well, I'm saying that it's the show being clever, and I give it props for that.
Okay.
So regardless of what I think of, like whether or not every scene plays out the way I want it to.
Some people were saying that it was disjointed, that like the timelines work way better in the book, and apparently this show is like very faithful to that adaptation.
That's what I'm trying to say, is like I respect it for it. I don't necessarily like how it came across, right? And then the one thing that it was weird was when he just kept on asking her out, right? Had she ever said like no and stop asking, then it would have been, I think, overboard. But when he does it 7 times, that was still kind of like, wow. That's committed, but some would call it stalking, is how they put it.
He doesn't even say anything the 7th time.
That's true. He comes in there with his little suit that he always wears. The last part for that clever part of the show is the fact that they bring in first edition of the To Kill a Mockingbird, and they start telling us the background of how she was friends with Truman Capote. And then they even bring up the Go Set a Watchman. I had to look up the name of the sequel because I remember this breaking a few years ago, where it turns out Atticus Finch in the original first edition
was like racist.
But that was like her first draft, and yet they still published it against her wishes, which I never was like a fan of, because yes, it affects how people see the other book, but like no one wants to see their first draft adapted and put out there. They did it as a cash grab.
I am a little surprised that you don't have that it was intense in one of your prose things, because when they're delivering...
That's not the end of my prose. Oh, okay. No, I'm saying that was all under the clever, how the show was being clever.
Oh, okay.
So that's my number 1 pro. Do you want me to continue with the pros or switch it? Okay, so the other one was I respected the character development of Lakeith Stanfield, because although it got a lot, like we got 4 episodes worth of basically just him being the center focus,
right,
you do get a good identity from him. Like he's dressed almost the same way in each thing. He has a flat cap, he has the plaid tweed suit, and then sometimes he has a beanie instead of the tweed suit, but he wears that tweed suit a lot. And then he also reminds me of Joe from You, because they have a similar job where he identifies expensive books and then he buys them for cheap and then he resells them. The only difference is that the Joe from You guy owned a bookstore, and then I think he also like he made the books better. Like he restructured them, or he like made new backs for them and stuff. Well, this guy just like goes to different houses and like offers to buy books out from people. He's just obsessed with them. Yeah.
Not giving anything away about the series, but Lakeith Stanfield has gotten critical acclaim for his role.
Yeah.
Like every single publication.
I would say though that the show is definitely riding too much on him. Like it's just expecting him to sell everything, and there are these twists that happen that just feel unorganic. And the last pro I'll give is that there's these 2 jokes. One is unintentional, and that's what we've already discussed with Michelle at the dinner, where she just turns to him right after his wife goes to the bathroom. I guess it's somewhat intentional, and she's like, there's a nude photo of your wife in an art gallery in Norway. It's frightening. like that's such a strange thing for your wife's best friend to tell you. And then the other one was when he was first hanging out with his kid, and the wife's maternity leave was over, so she had to go back to work at the library, and he was like trying to be super conscientious and putting like pillows and stuff in the back seat along with the baby crib and stuff. And he's driving down the Road, like Ricky Bobby style, where he looks around and everybody's going faster and honking at him, and he's like, "You okay back there?" Yeah, that was my favorite joke. It's just a good dad joke. But overall, those were my 3 huge pros.
I thought that it was intense. That's what I liked about the first episode, when they're delivering the baby at like that subway station, like, and it's like I think a 10-minute sequence. It's where the first episode ends. That was probably my favorite part.
That was your favorite part?
Well, because it was just like I was actually like getting emotional. I was like scared as to what was going to happen to Emma.
It struck me as obnoxious.
Okay.
There was so much violin tea kettle moaning in that scene. The labor scene was just so long and loud.
It was supposed to be that way.
It was disgusting because, like, not only is it a subway, just in general, not a place where you'd ever want to have a baby, and also I find it really confounding why, when they're in New York and she's going into labor unexpectedly, she still insists on going home to have the home birth. Like, that just doesn't seem safe in any way. So they get on the subway breaks down. You've got this mom and this daughter who don't leave as soon as they see what's going on. They just stick around there. Awesome. And then they have the baby, and he starts like kissing the baby, and then she grabs the baby, starts kissing it. They're gross at this point. They just came from dinner. They've been touching the subway. Like, you don't touch the baby that much, and you don't put your mouth on. Like, they clean it before they give it to you in the hospital.
Yes. So
it's got shit and stuff and blood all over it. I didn't like that scene that much. There was also a second scene that I really disliked that pissed me off. Later on in the series, there's a changing diaper scene where we're again supposed to like Keith Stanfield's character Apollo, and he's hanging out with Patrice, and the scene was supposed to show that he doesn't give a crap what other people think. He's going to take care of his baby.
Right.
I get that. A parent's got to do what a parent's got to do when their baby like has a diaper changed, right? But instead of looking for a bathroom, they're in one of those like not libraries, but like bookstores, right? Looking for books. He's just brought his baby along with him. He smells that the diaper needs to be changed. He immediately plops down in the middle of like people walking around and stuff, pulls like, and then starts changing the diaper. And so people give him a few like weird looks, and he's like, what? And it's like, nothing discreet about it. So he like wraps up the baby, does his thing. He takes the diaper, he holds it up, right? Yeah. And then he like has nowhere to put the diaper. And so he's just hanging around with the diaper and talking to Patrice, and he's like, hold this for a second. I'm going to go look for a bathroom for a trash can to throw this away in. And what Patrice does then, and what Apollo doesn't even question him on, is he just sticks it in between the books. And he's like, oh, it's John Grisham. Ha ha ha. And because it's such a messed up thing. Because the next person, and it smells bad, and it's like someone's bookstore, and it's just such a rude thing to do, and we're supposed to be sympathizing with these characters. As soon as that happened, I was like, I don't care if the mom kills the guy. Like, he deserves it. And then they also got mad at this lady who was like kind of being a Karen. She said to him, like, that baby carriage or whatever, the thing that you hold them on. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
The baby carrier. It's too big and it might cause hip dysplasia. Obviously a really dumb thing like to really complain to a parent about, unless you're like 100% sure. And then like they tell her to fuck off. And it was just like, I don't know, these characters were being a little too rude.
Well, it's been compared to them in Lovecraft Country. And one thing that I wanted to give the show credit for was that although it is kind of mostly an African-American cast, it doesn't seem like that affects the show too much. Like, it doesn't seem like they're really talking about race.
The Atticus Finch thing, they definitely brought it up. And yeah, there's an undercurrent there, which is supposed to exist, but like, it's not the main focus of the show, no, not like them.
And that's why I was giving it a pro to.
Yeah, I mean, there are shows that are out there where they just kind of throw it in your face a little bit. Like, they'll have an intention, like a cop will come up and then do something completely out of line, and it'll just be a representation issue. But like with this, it's not as much about that. The big problem with this show is that there are just too many introduced strings, right? Like another one of my cons is the cliches, predictable bits, and the tropes. But I'll get into that in a second. The too many strings goes along with like Apollo's dad goes mysteriously missing. You saw that in the first episode. Right. And then he shows up as a Blue Man Group guy. Like, he takes off the mask and then he's starting to blow blue smoke.
That was in a supposed dream.
But then we learn that he actually did come back during those times, and that the dreams that he's having are somewhat real. Like, his dad,
they're just flashbacks.
But his dad didn't blow blue smoke. We're not 100% clear. The mom doesn't give us a full rationalization for that. She just explains how she used to go to work on Saturdays, then she came back one Saturday and his dad was there again and she had to boot him out. But we don't know exactly the specifics to that. Then we find out that Apollo's mom's brother was killed when she was a child. Like, she was just wherever she was from, and like her brother, we saw that.
Yes.
Yeah, you saw that in the first episode. Then Apollo's nightmares, and then Emma's amnesia about how her mom went crazy, Emma making those 3 wishes, Emma also having the weird face to the camera, implying that she may have like has a genetic thing with her mom. There's also the online community of moms who are convinced that their babies aren't real.
Wait, there's
and I've told you a little bit about it. And followed this woman named Cal who lives in a mysterious island, and then they kill their husbands when they show up. There's also the stalker, William, who just, like, there was no way you should be trusting him as an audience member.
Right.
And so the fact that Apollo did, I know he's grieving, I know that he, like, is dealing with his shit, but, like, the fact that this guy believes everything that William was telling him, despite everything to the contrary. The guy was acting so shady, and then it turns out he is a shady character. It was a bad twist, and it just felt like something that the main character should have picked up upon earlier. And then there's a possibility that we're getting an unreliable narrator, and there's a possibility that we're not even in the plane of existence of the Earth anymore, because the actual narration told us that. And this island apparently only appears to some people at some times, kind of like Lost. And then there's this mysterious book that they keep on talking about called The Waters and the Wild, which he reads from and quotes from all the time. And these are all supposed to be, like, one of them would be an explanation as to why all the creepy events happen, right?
Yes.
Like, it could be the example of why it was cursed. Mm-hmm. But all of them put together just make it seem like they're throwing the entire kitchen sink at it.
And I hate to say this, but you're not going to get any answers by the end of this season.
Weird.
Like, none at all. In fact, a lot of people are saying this is banking, like selling the farm, that this is going to get a second season. Because if it doesn't, it's not going to be like a show that wants to tie up really any loose ends.
And I don't know if you got this, but despite all of that craziness, it still felt very repetitive and long. Like, we've got so many date scenes, so many drawling conversations, always complaining about how much they love each other, but that they are super tired, and it's just making the audience tired.
The pacing for the first episode, I did think, was very slow. In fact, that was probably the main reason why I didn't want to watch the rest of the episodes leading up to it. What would you give?
The third episode twist, where he's like, witches? ? And this is when William's kind of pushing him towards doing the investigation thing, makes it seem like the fourth episode is going to move. But then you watch the fourth episode, and William continues to have to drag Apollo along with him to this island, and then when they get there, that's when all this crazy stuff starts happening, and it feels like there are some answers being thrown your way, but even more questions. Like, the cow lady is able to make her puppets seem like they're actually talking, and then convince Apollo somewhat that his baby might not have been real. It just feels like there's too... It's not even too complicated a story. It just feels like it's a mess.
I didn't like how Apollo was so incredulous in
incredulous?
Yeah, in like the first episode, because it's just such an overplayed, as you were saying, kind of stereotype where it's like the husband doesn't believe what the wife is seeing until like way.
You're talking about with the snapping of the thing?
Not only the snapping of the thing, but it's like it seems like even you're saying now he's still not 100% on board with all the craziness.
For sure, he wanted to kill Emma because of what she did to their child, but like the question is whether or not their child actually exists, if she has it, like we don't know. The last con that I have written down is that it's cliche, predictable, and tropey. Apple has this thing where if it's not a space show, it's a New York based show. The Crowded Room, City on Fire, Dear Edward, The Morning Show, all of those came out pretty recently and take place in New York as well. They also like to do a thing on Apple where the parents have home births. That's a big deal in Severance. And only 1.4% of people in the entire U.S. have those. And so like the idea, especially when it's an unexpected labor like hers was, to then insist on it is crazy. Grievance groups, cults, also very like repetitive in the Apple sphere. The creepy baby crazy mom is not an Apple thing, but it is a classic horror movie trope. Haunting of Hill House did it better. Servant does it better. Servant, I wasn't like a huge fan of the first, like, I'm still not like an entire fan of it, but I do respect it more than a show like this. I think Servant is like a solid 7 out of 10, while this I'm going to definitely give like a 5, or no, actually a 4 out of 10. Like, it is
4 out of 10.
Yeah, I did not enjoy it by the end, and it just feels like they're stringing me along with all these strings.
There's two different sides when it comes to the reviews for this show. It seems like either people are calling it a unique fantasy show or the most unique fantasy show of 2023, or at worst it's mediocre. It seems like you're giving it even more of a negative review. It's a 6.6 on IMDb, a 64% on Rotten Tomatoes, 74% audience score, but Variety said in a negative review for it, they said, from the moment the Changeling begins until the final scene, it feels as if the creators have no interest in explaining any of the details, calling the story absurd.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course it has to be absurd, but I guess I agree with that. The name of the Facebook mommy group that they have is called Friendmore. Because we see it. Yeah, that's the one where the wise ones are at. That's that group of the
So
cult.
is that story introduced to give Emma more of a reason to believe her baby wasn't real?
Yeah. So in the second episode, that's when the parents are like devolving a little bit because they're so tired, and she is taking the worst of it. By the end of the episode, she's literally screaming at the baby and saying, "You're not real. One of us has to go." And yeah, she stumbles upon that mommy group, and I guess is purchasing or not purchasing, but goes to get chains to tie up her husband or the baby or something. And yeah, I think it's in a way poking at those weird Facebook groups that do exist.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it might end up that they're being right. So I don't know if it's trying to support a conspiracy theory or where it's going with that in mind. But then you also have the William character, who I feel like I've given the least amount of time because he only really appears in the last episode. But he's such a weird character. He's like a Mr. Robot mixed with, like, his motives don't make any sense. The storyline with him trying to buy the To Kill a Mockingbird book to like save his marriage was such a placeholder for them just to give an excuse to him getting close to Apollo, when really he could have just recruited Apollo, I think, in the third episode, and they could have gone and found this island together earlier if he had just given the CCTV footage saying, "Here's your wife," because that's where it ended up going. He reminds me a little bit of the Better Call Saul character, the one with the baseball cards, the guy from What We Do in the Shadows, because he's so like nerdy. But in the fourth episode, he gets beat up, like it looks like he should be dead, by this group of wise ones, and his wife is going to like show up there as they kill him. It's a strange show, and he says that if Apollo doesn't speak on his behalf and try to talk to Greta, that's his wife, to get her like back, then everybody on the island is going to die. And that's just left ambiguously. Why? Did he plant a bomb? We don't know.
Okay, I mean, I know that the first 7 episodes are 45 to 50 minutes, and then the finale is like 28 minutes or something like that.
That's going to be upsetting for people.
But the weird thing is that the first season ends only midway through the book. So even though there's been all this stuff that's happened.
Silo also cut you off without a ton of answers, but it gave you enough where it didn't finish the books at all. Like there was definitely like way more about to happen, but like it did it in such a cool way. Archive 81, I would say, also like mystery wise, time displacement wise, like that was what I think this show is trying to like do. It just doesn't accomplish it.
I'll end it with this. Kelly Marcel, that's the person that created this. They also worked on all 3 of the Venom movies, including the upcoming one. But they talked about the negative reviews that the show was getting, and they said, "I'm very proud, and I'm even weirdly proud of the negative reviews, because I feel like even the negative reviews are saying, holy shit, they really tried something." And it seems like that's what you were kind of saying as well. It just didn't work out in the right way.
I don't know. I feel like they shouldn't have made the show until they knew exactly why they were going to, or how to reveal enough to make the audience feel like they're getting something out of it. So yeah, any show can be said to, oh, at least they tried it. You know, I don't see that as a selling point. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.